Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about another DC 911 problem and a wild lawsuit over a mural and also the DMV's Olympic romp. I'm here with the Washington Post's Jenny Gathright and my CityCast colleague, Julia Karen. Today is Friday, August 9th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
So you guys, we have talked on this show, like more than I ever imagined we would, about DC's 911 challenges, trying to resist making a Public Enemy reference here. The latest one was on Friday. Jenny, you covered this. What happened?
Yeah, so on Friday, there was a technology problem that basically meant that everybody at the city's Office of Unified Communications lost access to their computers. That prevented people who take calls and then dispatch them to emergency first responders from being able to easily see some things that they usually can see on their computer screens, like where different ambulance units are, which unit is the closest to a given scene. So something really tragic happened a few minutes into this outage, right as dispatchers were kind of adjusting to this reduced visibility. There was a cardiac arrest call in Northwest DC on Connecticut Avenue for an infant in cardiac arrest. What at first happened, things went right. The dispatcher sent an appropriate, what they call response package to the scene, which consists of, the nearest engine and then also two different paramedic units. But the issue was that the engine got there really fast and started CPR, but the paramedic units were delayed. They didn't hear the dispatch because they were on another call. This is something that would have been easily seen if the computer system was operating functionally, but it wasn't that day. And so those paramedics were about 15 minutes delayed in arriving to that scene. And you really heard, listening to the radio traffic from Friday, you sort of hear the desperation from the first responders on the scene. And what's important about this call is that basically we'll never know if those paramedics arriving sooner would have saved this baby's life. The baby ended up dying. We'll never know. But what we do know is that the highest available level of care was not sent quickly to this baby. And so it's sort of rippled across, first responders across the city. I think people in sort of all areas in OUC and FEMS are really sort of feeling this. And I think a lot of people are asking questions in the aftermath about what could have been done differently.
So has the Office of Communications or anything done anything to solve this problem, this power outage? What did they do?
What I've been told is that they practice for when they lose access to the CAT or lose visibility to this computer-aided dispatching system. It's not actually the first time it's happened in recent months. By my count, it's happened 5 times in the last few months. One of them was probably related to the CrowdStrike global outage. So they practice for this scenario. And what happens is what used to happen, right? The city did not always have a computer-aided dispatching system. It used to be that dispatching was done all over the radio. And so that is the world that they transition to when the CAD goes out. So they still receive 911 calls and they can still dispatch them, but they just have to adjust to this reduced visibility. And that requires checking in more often and knowing which units are where and which units are closer. And it's just harder to do when you don't have this computer system.
Wait, so we've had Dave Statter on our pod. He's the retired WUSA reporter who's made a sort of passion project out of tracking 911 problems. You mentioned that this CAD system has had a bunch of outages lately, but sort of a bigger picture, writ large, the system's fallibility has been pretty clear for a couple of years. Why do problems persist? I mean, has this has been a thing where people have variously said, we're going to make this the top priority, we're going to get to the bottom of it, et cetera. But it seems like sort of a basic service of government that is not being done perfectly.
Yeah, I think there are a few things that Dave Statter has pointed out repeatedly. One, he's called attention to dispatching errors. And I think one thing that we're not really clear on right now is what is the scope of that problem. Last year, the DC Council passed emergency legislation, then they made it permanent with Security C that basically forced DC's 911 agency to disclose more information about things like staffing and errors. But it's unclear that we're seeing the full universe of dispatching errors. So I think without knowing how big the problem is, it's sort of hard to talk about addressing it. The agency, for example, is quick to point out that DC has one of the busiest 911 call centers in the country. So when we talk about errors, they always want to put them in that context. But I think we just simply are not clear on the universe of errors. But it's clear Statter has pointed out through his reporting that the same kinds of errors seem to be happening over and over again. Things like wrong quadrant, like sending first responders to an address in the wrong quadrant, and also things like not dispatching them the nearest available unit. Another big struggle the agency has been more open about is staffing. And it's very clear that staffing has been a problem for the agency. When we post staffing data on our public dashboard that was required by this legislation, that data showed that, last month, nearly 90% of shifts did not meet the staffing targets for call takers or dispatchers. And the city says they're doing a big recruiting push. They're holding these prospect days and trying to make the recruitment process more efficient. But that's an area, a shortcoming they've been really open about.
And I guess I'd look at the, when they say, well, we have one of the busiest 911 call centers in the country. I mean, one answer to that is, yeah, that's DC is a city that has a lot of activity in that sense. But the other answer is, so what? I mean, this is one of these things where the expectation is perfection. And if you can't achieve it, then, maybe that means there's something wrong with the leadership, or maybe that means there's something wrong with the level of staffing or the budget or whatever. Has there been in the political space somebody who has taken on this as an issue and vowed that, either heads will roll or budgets will grow or whatever the fix may be?
There have been things done in pieces. I'm not sure that people who look at this closely think enough has been done. The council obviously passed legislation requiring more data from the agency, which is one step. I think that the furthest step I've seen taken, or the biggest proposal to really overhaul things, has come from Ward 1 council member Brianne Nadeau, who's basically proposed removing a lot of dispatching responsibility from OUC entirely and giving it back to the fire department. Before the Office of Unified Communications was formed, the fire department did its own dispatching, which meant that you had people with experience who had done the job doing the dispatching. There were a lot of reasons why the city went to a unified call center, thinking it would actually improve performance. But I think it's an open question. I think some people in this space, Brianne Nadeau, obviously one of them, thinks that the fire department should take some of that responsibility back. Others say that they want to work with OUC to improve things.
So what do you think the future of the Office of Unified Communications and DC's 911 call center and the fire department's role in this is going to be in the coming years? If this keeps happening, what do you think is going to happen in the future?
The leadership in the public safety sector in DC is focused on the staffing problem. I think they have been slower to acknowledge dispatching errors and slower to sort of disclose more information about that. If we look at what happened on Friday, the city put out information about the call, but in their first, statement about what happened, they did not acknowledge the fact that the paramedics were delayed in arriving to the scene. That was an important piece that might sort of give you the window you're looking for into sort of which aspects of this problem the city is more forthcoming about. Going forward, I think it could put pressure for Brianne Nadeau's bill to get a hearing potentially. It hasn't yet. I know that Brooke Pinto's office is focused on this issue. She told me after Friday's incident that she was really seriously looking into what happened and knows that things could be improved. So I think it will just put political pressure on everybody who touches this agency, whether that's in an oversight capacity or in a leadership capacity, to be forthcoming about what's going on.
Summer's not over yet. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week brings the eats from August 12th through the 18th at hundreds of locations across the DMV, offering amazing 3-course menus for lunch and dinner and brunch. It's a great time to dine out at a favorite eatery or indulge your culinary curiosity and try something new. There's an awesome variety of cuisines to explore and menu options to fit all palates. Many locations are also offering cocktail and wine pairings to further elevate your dining experience. And as a special treat for the summer promotion, you can feed your adventurous side with delicious American lamb dishes at select locations. Just look for the patriotic lamb on listings at rwdmv.com, where you can find the full list of participating restaurants, view menus, and book your reservations. Metropolitan Washington Restaurant Week is presented by RAMW and Events DC.
So there's this, maybe you're familiar, there's this at Stead Playground, which is on P Street, like around 16th. There's been a mural for like 30 some years. In the 90s, that was first painted. It had the word humanity as the sort of centerpiece of the mural. And in the 90s, they made a version of it, which was like, it was like KRS-One influenced with a lot of like, stay in school, kids, kind of messaging, a little better than that. And then in 2001, it was repainted by a group of graffiti artists, including Roger Gassman, who's sort of, he's a big deal. He's like a curator, made a couple magazines, all sort of dedicated to street art, graffiti art. He was he's also been a part of documentaries like the Banksy documentary, and he made the Cool Disco Dan documentary in DC like 10 years ago. So it was redone with artists including him. And then this year, it was painted over again with a new mural. Roger Gassman, and among others, are not pleased with this turn of events. He is suing, citing a law from, I don't know, like a 35-year-old law called the Visual Artists' Rights Act, which basically, as I understand it, keeps visual artists from having their work like bastardized for advertising or otherwise like sort of taken away from them, even if it's a painting they sell. And it's been used in the past by mural artists to sue over the destruction of the painting over whatever of their work. I have no idea about the law of this, but I think it's so interesting because of like, how do we think about the murals, how the look of a wall in your neighborhood? Is that like a thing that must be maintained permanently to protect the rights of the creators who made it? Is it like the property of the person who owns the building? Is it like a thing that's going to reflect the neighborhood, and as neighborhood changes or tastes change, the wall will change? How do you guys think when you're walking down the street and you see a mural? Like, whose property is that? What is that to you?
I live in Ems Morgan, and a friend was telling me about the history of a mural that's sort of near where we live. It's kind of like Euclid and 17th-ish, Euclid and between 17th and 18th. And there's a mural. It's starting to get very faded. It's cows on bikes eating ice cream. And my friend was telling me, and I don't know if this is true, I haven't looked it up and confirmed, but she was telling me that it was because on that corner there used to be a Ben and Jerry's, and then there also was a bike shop. And so the mural was sort of commissioned to combine the concepts of those two spaces. And I think that's such a, as neighborhoods change, that mural is a reminder of what used to be there. And it's starting to get kind of faded. And we were saying, oh, well, they should just freshen it up. Like, I love the mural and they should repaint it and keep it the same way it was. But it's an interesting question of like sort of what a mural says about a neighborhood at a moment in time, and sort of like what was inspiring things in that moment, and then what it means to change that.
And like, must a neighborhood always stay the same? I mean, which I think sort of gets to like a lot, like, look at DC is still a healthy and vibrant city, and healthy and vibrant city means new people coming, new ideas coming, new businesses coming. And by definition, that also means things going. And I think all of us would much rather live in a vibrant place than a static place. So on the one hand, it's like, yeah, maybe people want to paint over the cows on bikes, or maybe the only reason to keep them is if you think it looks cool, not like, let's keep it because it's always been there. But it's sort of I think it really gets to like, how do you think about your city and your neighborhood? Do you all have like favorite DC murals?
I don't know that I have a favorite, but I know that one that came about basically in 2023, in like December 2023, near my apartment. I live in Cleveland Park. And right where the exercise coach is on Connecticut Avenue, they painted this mural. It looks kind of like roses, which is really cool. It got there this spring. And to me, it adds like a really cute kind of like pop of color to a neighborhood that's like in Northwest and sometimes can be kind of stodgy and is like technically considered a suburb, right? So like for me, like that's really cool. I wouldn't mind if it changed occasionally. Maybe they paint over it to have it be something else. But right now, it's these really cool looking roses, and I'm a fan of it.
My favorite mural might actually be a new one, which kind of goes to your point, Michael, that things can change and be added. It's that really tall postal worker who's playing jazz on 14th Street. I love that guy.
I mean, so Roger Gassman made that documentary about Cool Disco Dan. Cool Disco Dan was like when I was in high school, it was like the early 90s, late 80s, something like that, who was just a tagger. And he didn't, he did not create like elaborate works of art. He just wrote his tag. And at the time it was like, this is very bad. This person is defacing property. Like that was the sort of like civic appropriate response. But, a few years ago, they like put a, taken from its original wall, Cool Disco Dan tag in the Wilson building, because by that point it had become like a symbol of what DC used to be, in a city that was like anxious about gentrification and change. So it's just to say, like, the stuff you put on your wall today, its meaning may be completely different to people even 10 or 20 years in the future, which is like awesome, but also kind of dangerous because those people might not like it anymore and might decide to get rid of it. All right, so I don't know if y'all are Olympics fans, but according to reliable sources close to CityCast DC's Julia Caron, athletes from the DMV are way over performing, considering our percentage of the United States as a whole. Do you have stats, Julia?
Oh, do I have stats? Chew on this for analytics. You ready for this? All right. So there's this fabulous stat from Jen Ryan, who had this tweet that said, Olympic medals alert if the UVA community, so University of Virginia, which is a little bit outside our purview, but a bunch of like local DC and Maryland and Virginia athletes go there. If the UVA community were a country, we would be ranked 13th in terms of medals won. Go Who's, bonkers stat. My former boss at what used to be NBC Sports Washington, now Monumental Sports, Troy Machier, said, if Montgomery County, Maryland was its own country, it would rank in the top 50 for all-time Summer Olympic medals. Go Montgomery County. As a native of Montgomery County, huge pride there. Huge pride there. Love that for us. But yes, DC's metro area athletes are absolutely dominating. Kevin Durant from Suitland, Maryland, became the all-time leading scorer in basketball at the Olympics when the U.S. beat Brazil. He surpassed four-time Olympic gold medalist Lisa Leslie, who tallied 488 points during her Olympic career. That's a lot of points. Durant has passed that. Katie Ledecky won gold in the 800-meter, 1500-meter swims. There was a fabulous tweet that I saw where they were like, they need to build a statue of her in Bethesda and then build her nearest competitor like 4 blocks away or 3 blocks away. And I'm just like, yes, that's perfect. Also, how disheartening is it if you're like in the pool and Katie Ledecky is like lapping you and going past you? I would just feel so bad for myself.
I have actually been in that position because I swam against her in high school.
Holy smokes, tell us everything. Insider, Jenny Gathright, let's go. How was it?
Failed Olympian, Jenny Gathright.
Failed Olympian. It's all good. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I was a senior when she was a freshman, so I got 1 year of having some meets with her, and she's so nice. And we'd finish that 500 free. She'd have lap me, and she'd shake my hand and say, "Great race, Jenny." So,
did you swim on the same team with her or against her?
No, but I swam against her at meets and around club swimming and high school meets. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you swam against Tori Husk, but she helped lead the U.S. swimming team to a huge win in the 4x100 meter relay. And that team also scored a world record. And one of the coolest stories that I've seen is this woman, Thea LaFawn. She was a University of Maryland grad. She taught special education in Silver Spring. She won the first ever medal for Dominica in the triple jump. And it was a gold medal. So that's absolutely elite. Like, way to go, Thea. But yes, overall, the DMV is crushing it right now. I feel a sense of pride. How do you all feel that like our small but mighty area is absolutely cruising at this Olympics? How do you feel?
Well, as a DC native, you guys keep talking about the suburbs. Like, who do you got for me from the city?
Okay, so Mike, I don't know if you've run past this person since you yourself are a proclaimed runner, but Taylor Knibb is from DC. She was at the Olympics in 2020, and she's there now. And she scored a silver medal in the triathlon, in the team triathlon, which is sick. So DC contributing. You'll love to see it.
I'm sure if anyone's run past anyone, it's she past me. But
yes.
I appreciate the shout out, Julia.
It's all good. Similar to Jenny, maybe you also have been lapped by Taylor Knibb and just never known it.
Jenny, I know you haven't been at the Washington Post that long, but given that you're basically an almost Olympian yourself, having swum against Katie Ledecky, how could you fail to convince your bosses to send you to Paris for this?
Man, I don't know. I guess I just really messed up. I didn't even think to ask.
Well, thank you for regaling us of tales of swimming against Katie Ledecky. I'm sure like every person in the greater Bethesda DMV area has a story about being lapped by one of the greatest swimmers of all time.
Yeah, I think I'm one of many, one of legions.
Well, Jenny, awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Julia, great to see you.
Good to see you, Mike.
That is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our senior executive producer is Priyanka Tilve. Our senior producer is Julia Karen. And our assistant producer is Ash Durbin. Kayla Cote-Stemmerman writes our fabulous newsletter. It's called Hey DC. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not talk about it at the Olympics closing weekend party that I'm sure you're going to go to? We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.